And point number 5 says, Paul indicated Antichrist originated in the Jerusalem temple. Paul indicated Antichrist originated in the Jerusalem temple. And our texts there are 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3 to 5, Matthew 27, verse 51, Matthew 26, verse 55, Matthew 23, verses 2 to 3. All right, so let's go to our Bible and we will read 2 Thessalonians 2. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3 to 5. Okay, let's go to our Bible. It says there, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day, the day of the Lord, shall not come except there come a falling away. By the way, let me just put this in the Berean because I don't need to go over what I just explained. Okay? So no one should deceive you in any way, because it is not until the apostasy, the specific apostasy, shall have come first. Okay? And the man of lawlessness shall have been revealed, the son of destruction. Okay, so let's get back to the King James, right? So, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come the, not a, the falling away first. And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember you not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things? Good? So Paul talks here about the revealing of the man of sin, the son of perdition, okay? And that apostasy and that falling away would happen before the day of the Lord. Now, don't get it twisted. All of these things which Paul was warning the Thessalonians about were things which would happen in their time, in that generation. He was not speaking of things or events to happen thousands of years into the future. He was warning the Thessalonians about these things because they would manifest in their time. Now, Paul said at the time of the apostasy, the man of sin, the son of perdition, would be revealed. We see that Paul indicated that this man of sin, this son of perdition, presently at the time Paul was writing, occupied a position in the temple. Notice what he said. He says, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who is opposing. This is a present tense verb. Okay? Who is opposing and exalting himself. Notice the present tense in the verb. He didn't say who will oppose and who will exalt himself. He says this man of sin and this son of perdition, at the time Paul was writing, was already opposing and was already exalting himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God was presently in Paul's time sitting in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So Paul was not again writing about something to happen thousands of years into the future. He was talking about something that was happening in his time in the temple that was at Jerusalem. So again, we need to ask the question, how come is the modern church still looking for this man of sin and this son of perdition that Paul wrote about? Even the Greek words that Paul used pinpointed whom he was referring to. Now, there are two Greek words which the King James Version renders as one single English word, temple. Okay? So there are two Greek words, and the King James versions render both these Greek words as temple. But there's a distinction. There's a reason why there are two different Greek words, because it refers to two aspects of the temple. The two Greek words are naos and hieron. Now, the naos was the main sanctuary building of the temple. It was the domain of the priest. No other common person could enter that building. It was the main sanctuary building, which you have the holy place and the most holy place. Good? That was the domain of the priests. Then the hieron was the temple premises, the buildings which were surrounding the sanctuary, and that was typically called the courtyard. That was where the common folk came to bring their offerings. All right? So let's look at examples of these. Matthew 27:51 for an example of the naos. All right? Matthew 27, verse 51. Matthew 27, verse 51. It says, and behold, this is speaking about the time of Christ's crucifixion. It says, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in two from the top to the bottom. Okay? The veil of the temple was rent in two from the top to the bottom. And the word temple here is naos. And so the fact that we have a veil of the temple tells us this was the sanctuary, because the most holy place was separated from the holy place by the veil. Okay? So this veil was in the main sanctuary. This was where the priests ministered. No ordinary folk were allowed in this building. Not even Jesus was allowed to go in there. Good? Only the priests. So that was the naos. Now let's look at an example of the hieron. Matthew 26, verse 55. Matthew 26, verse 55. All right. It says, in that same hour, said Jesus to the multitudes, are you come out as a thief? Are you come out as against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? This is at the arrest of Christ, where they came to arrest him. Look what Jesus said. I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and you laid no hold on me. Now notice this, when Jesus says the temple here, notice he's saying that all the soldiers and the common people who were there listening to him teaching them. So this was a public area, an area where soldiers could come and arrest him, and an area where people could hear him teaching. So it was a public area of the temple. So this was the courtyard area of the temple. And the word used here is the hieron. Good? So we have two Greek words, naos and hieron, which both are translated in the King James as temple, but they refer to two different aspects of the temple. The naos is the domain of the priest. No other person can go in that into the naos. Only the priest. But in the hieron, it's a public area where the people brought their offerings, where they come to hear Jesus and the other rabbis teaching, and so on. Good? Now, which word did Paul use when he talked about the man of sin and the son of perdition sitting? Because sitting, notice Jesus says, I sat daily teaching. So sitting is a position of teaching. Sitting is a position of authority. Right? So where was the man of sin seated? Was he seated in the Hieron, in the public area, teaching the people, ministering there? Or was he sitting in the Naos, the domain where the priest alone could minister? The word that was used by Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, where he says, the man of sin and the son of perdition, who at that time, at Paul's time, who was opposing and exalting himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God was sitting in the temple. The word here is the Naos. This was the domain of the priest, which means that this man of sin and this son of perdition was among the priesthood of Israel. He was probably not an individual, but referred to the apostate leadership of Israel. Because they had access to the Naos. Right? And the chief priest in the time of Jesus and in the time of Paul was like the king of Israel. He had that authority, he had that power. Good? And so Paul was pinpointing that the man of sin was operating from the sanctuary of the temple, the domain of the chief priest. This is where Paul said that the system, which he called the man of sin and the son of perdition, this system which was opposing God and was exalting itself above God, there was where that system was sitting in authority. Look at what Jesus said in Matthew 23, verse 2. Matthew 23, verse 2. Or could even start from verse 1. Then spoke Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Right? The religious leaders were sitting. Remember I said sitting is a position of authority. All, therefore, whatever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not you after their works, for they say and they do not. They were hypocritical. The things what they were imposing on the people, they themselves did not do it. But they were seated. They were seated. They had the authority. And that is the same word that Paul used to describe this man of sin, this son of perdition. He was seated in the temple, in the Naos. But in there, that system was exalting itself above God's Son and his new and living way. Paul's warnings had been consistent and persistent. I believe that since Paul himself had been an integral part of that system, remember, Saul previously or originally was Saul of Tarsus. Paul had converted to become one of the remnant, but before, in his previous life, if you want to put it that way, he was a zealous Pharisee. His name was Saul of Tarsus, and we remember in the book of Acts, Saul was the one who initiated the persecution against the remnant in Acts chapter 7 and Acts chapter 8. He was the one who went to the high priest in the Naos to get permission, letters of permission, to persecute the remnant. Right? So you see where that Antichrist spirit originated. It originated in the naos, in the temple. And Paul was one of them, had been one of them. So he knew and he understood how they thought, and he understood how they operated. Paul indicated that he had already warned the Thessalonians on a previous occasion concerning this man of sin. Remember in verse 5 he says, "Remember you not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things?" So the Thessalonians and the remnant were well aware on the details of the identity of this group of persons whom consisted the man of sin and the son of perdition. So this Paul was not referring to an individual. He was referring to a certain group of people who he called the man of sin and the son of perdition. Paul and the apostles absolutely were not speaking of an individual who would come on the scene thousands of years later. Paul indicated that he was aware of the deviousness of the religious leaders of Israel in his time, in his day. They were the man of sin and the son of perdition. They were in a position of authority and influence in the naos, the temple of God, over Israel in Paul's time. But they were not of God, nor were they for God. In fact, they opposed God's plan for a new covenant world, and they attempted to destroy all those who were embracing Christ and the new covenant. This was the origin of Antichrist. And they were about, in Paul's time, they were about to launch the most devastating blow to the remnant by means of the insidious Antichrist doctrines.